In 2025, while the world was watching the trial of the century, SEC versus Ripple, 20 countries were quietly signing contracts with the same company. To build the future of your money on its technology, imagine you wake up in the morning, open your banking app, and see that your money has an expiry date. If you don't spend it by the end of the month, it will burn up. You think it's dystopian? It's already being tested in China, and the technology that will make it possible everywhere is ready. My name is Mr. Darkweb, and today I'm going to tell you a story that I've been putting together piece by piece for over 3 months. A story that started as an ordinary investigation about cryptocurrencies, but ended with something that keeps me up at night. I am not one to believe in conspiracy theories. My work is based on documents, dates, and facts that can be verified. But sometimes the facts add up to a picture that is hard to explain by chance. And this story is just such a case. It all started with a simple question. There is a rule in the crypto community. Bitcoin is freedom. It is decentralization. It is the answer to the banking system that defrauded millions of people in 2008. Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin as a tool of liberation. Money that no one controls. Money that can't be printed by government order. Money that belongs only to you. But if Bitcoin was created to destroy banks, why is XRP needed? This question has haunted me since I first heard about Ripple. Because XRP is the exact opposite of everything the crypto community is fighting for. It's not decentralization. It's not anonymity. It's not freedom from the banking system. XRP was created specifically for banks, to make them faster, cheaper, and more efficient, to save them. And here's the weird part. While Bitcoin maximalists and regulators were waging war over the future of decentralized finance, XRP was quietly making its way into the heart of the global financial infrastructure. Partnerships with central banks, membership in working groups at the Bank for International Settlements, official partnership with the World Economic Forum, contracts with MasterCard to develop digital currencies. Coincidence? It could be. But let's look at the facts. In October of the year 2020, an experiment took place in Shenzhen, China. The government distributed about $1.5 million worth of digital yuan to 50,000 citizens. Sounds like a regular promotion, right? Except that this money had an expiry date. If you don't spend it in a week, it just disappears from your account. 90% of the recipients spent every last yuan. The experiment was deemed a success. Programmable money. Money that can be programmed to do anything. Expiry dates. To limit purchases, for automatic tax write-offs, to block you if you say the wrong thing on social media. When I started digging deeper, I discovered something interesting. The technology that China uses for its digital yuan and the technology that Ripple offers to central banks around the world work on similar principles: centralized control, full transparency of transactions to the regulator, the ability to program rules directly into the money. 137 countries and currency unions are now exploring the possibility of launching their own central bank digital currencies. That's 98% of the world's GDP. In 2020, there were 35 such countries. In 5 years, that number has almost quadrupled, and Ripple is at the center of this process. You see the paradox? Cryptocurrencies emerged as a response to the financial crisis of 1928, as a way to take control of money away from banks and governments. And now the same technology is being used to create a system of total financial control and the company that's doing it has been suing the U.S. regulator for 5 years under the cameras of the world. While everyone was watching the court, the real game was on the other field. In February of 2022, something happened in Canada that showed how it works in practice. Protesting truckers blocked Ottawa, opposing COVID restrictions. Justin Trudeau's government used the Emergency Act for the first time in the country's history, and one of its first actions was to freeze the protesters' bank accounts. Without a trial, no warning, 257 accounts totaling nearly 8 million Canadian dollars were blocked within days. Later, the court recognized these actions as unlawful, but the money was already frozen. People could no longer pay for housing, for food, for petrol. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work. Now imagine that such a system is built right into the money. No need to call the bank, no waiting for a court order. An algorithm makes a split-second decision. Your social rating falls below a certain threshold. Access to credit is cut off. Did you participate in a protest? Your money is frozen until the circumstances are clarified. Did you buy too much alcohol this month? Your next purchase is blocked. It's not a fantasy. It is a technical possibility that already exists, and XRP is one of the bricks in the foundation of this system. But this is where I have to stop, because it would be unfair to demonize technology without understanding its history. Perhaps it's all just progress. Perhaps the creators of Ripple really wanted to make the world a better place. Perhaps central bank digital currencies are a boon to humanity. To understand where this is going, we have to go back to the beginning. The year 2012, San Francisco, where a group of technological visionaries decided to create what they called the Internet of Values. That year, the world didn't know what cryptocurrency was yet. Bitcoin had been around for 3 years, but it was still a toy for geeks and libertarians. The exchange rate hovered around $10. No one took it seriously, except for a few people who saw the technology as something more. One of them was Jed McCaleb, the programmer who a year earlier had created Mt. Gox, the first major Bitcoin exchange, the same exchange that would later collapse and bury hundreds of millions of dollars underneath it. But in 2012, McCaleb had already sold Mt. Gox and was thinking about something else, about how to do what Bitcoin was doing too slowly and too expensively. The second was Chris Larsen, a serial entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, a man who has already built and sold several fintech companies, a man with an impeccable reputation in the world of traditional finance, a man who understood how banks work from the inside. Together, they founded a company that was initially called OpenCoin. Later, it would become known as Ripple Labs, and later simply as Ripple. I found an interview with Larsen from that period. He spoke beautiful words about financial inclusion, about the billions of people without access to banking, about how blockchain technology could enable them to send money around the world for pennies, the Internet of Value, money that moves as freely as emails. Sounds noble, doesn't it? But here's what's interesting. Unlike Bitcoin, where coins are mined by miners as the network operates, all 100 billion XRP tokens were created at once, at launch. And a significant part of these tokens ended up in the hands of the founders and Ripple itself. When I examined the documents, I found that in the year 2017, Ripple placed 55 billion XRP in escrow, a special mechanism that releases 1 billion tokens each month. Sounds like a sensible measure against a sudden dump into the market, but it also means the company controls more than half of all issuance. Compare this to Bitcoin, where Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared, leaving his coins untouched. where no one controls the network, where the rules are written in code and cannot be changed at will. Ripple was originally built on different principles, and these principles determined everything that happened next. In the first years, the company worked almost in the shadows. While the crypto community was arguing about decentralization and anarcho-capitalism, Ripple was methodically building relationships with those whom crypto enthusiasts considered enemies. Banks. Their flagship product was called RippleNet, a network for instant international payments. If you've ever sent money overseas through a regular bank, you know the pain. 3 to 5 business days, 3 to 5% commission, an opaque exchange rate, a bunch of middlemen each taking their cut. Ripple offered a solution: a transaction in 3 to 5 seconds, commission less than a cent, full transparency, and this is where XRP came into play. You see, the traditional international transfer system works through so-called nostro accounts. These are accounts that banks hold with each other in different countries. To send money from the US to Japan, an American bank must have an account with a Japanese bank with enough yen, or find a chain of intermediaries. This parked money is estimated to be worth about $27 trillion worldwide. Dead capital just lying around waiting. XRP was conceived as a bridge currency. Instead of holding accounts in dozens of currencies, a bank could convert dollars into XRP, send it in seconds, and convert it to yen at the other end. The service was called on-demand liquidity. On-demand liquidity, an elegant solution, practical, and very attractive for banks, which have spent billions on maintaining outdated infrastructure. In the year 2015, an event happened that I consider a turning point. The World Economic Forum, the same organization that gathers the world's elite in Davos every year, awarded Ripple Labs the status of technology pioneer. This is not just an award, it is an entrance ticket to the world where global decisions are made. Previous recipients of this status include Google, Twitter, and Airbnb. Since then, Ripple's trajectory has changed. The company is no longer just another crypto startup. It became part of the system. I've been studying the list of Ripple partners over the next few years. It reads like a directory of the world's financial elite: Santander, Standard Chartered, American Express, SBI Holdings of Japan, National Bank of Australia, Canada's Imperial Bank of Commerce. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. By the year 2018, RippleNet had more than 100 financial institutions. By 2025, there were over 300. The remittance corridors covered Asia, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. But something else was happening alongside this growth, something that most XRP investors preferred not to notice. Ripple was selling its tokens, lots of tokens, to institutional investors directly, on the open market through exchanges. Quarter after quarter, the company recorded hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue from the sale of XRP. This money was used for development, for marketing, for partnerships. The mechanism worked perfectly. The price of XRP was on the rise. In January 2018, the token reached a historic high of $3.37. The market capitalization exceeded $130 billion. For a brief moment, XRP became the second cryptocurrency in the world after Bitcoin, and then came the regulators. Well, they've been coming for a long time. It's just that in 2020, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission decided that it couldn't keep quiet any longer. On the 22nd of December, a few days before the new year, the SEC filed a lawsuit against Ripple Labs, Chris Larsen, and new CEO Brad Garlinghouse. The charge was simple and devastating. XRP, according to the SEC, was an unregistered security. This meant that all these years Ripple had been selling securities without a license. The amount of allegedly illegally raised funds, $1.3 billion. The crypto community was divided. Some celebrated. Finally, the regulators took on the banking cryptocurrency. Others panicked. If XRP is recognized as a security, what does this mean for other tokens? Exchanges have started delisting. Coinbase, Kraken, Bitstamp removed XRP from trading. The price collapsed. It seemed that the Ripple story was coming to an end. But I discovered something strange. While the trial was going on, while the headlines were abuzz with news about Ripple's standoff with the SEC, the company continued to sign contracts. Not with exchanges, not with retail investors, with central banks. On the 22nd of December 2020, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission struck a blow that would destroy Ripple. 71-page lawsuit. Allegations of selling over $1 billion worth of unregistered securities. Personal charges against founder Chris Larson and CEO Brad Garlinghouse. The SEC was demanding more than just fines. The commission demanded that Ripple executives be barred from working in the securities industry forever. I remember the headlines at the time. The end of Ripple. XRP is dead. SEC destroys the world's third cryptocurrency. The price of the token collapsed 70% in a matter of weeks. Exchanges one after another announced delisting. Coinbase, Kraken, Bitstamp, eToro. Dozens of platforms abandoned XRP to avoid getting hit by the crackdown. To most observers, the outcome seemed a foregone conclusion. The SEC rarely loses. The commission has limitless resources, an army of lawyers, and a reputation for pushing to the end. Previous crypto projects caught in the SEC's crosshairs have either paid huge fines or simply disappeared. But Ripple has decided to fight. Garlinghouse has publicly stated that the company will defend itself to the last, that this trial will determine the future of the entire crypto industry, that it's time to draw a line. And so began a war that lasted almost 5 years. I spent weeks studying court documents, hundreds of pages of depositions, motions, expert reports. And the deeper I dived, the clearer I realized. This trial wasn't just about Ripple. It was about who would control the future of digital money. At the center of the dispute lay one question. What is XRP? Is it a security or a currency? The SEC used the so-called Howey test to respond, a test developed by the U.S. Supreme Court back in 1946. According to this test, something is a security if people invest money in a common enterprise, expecting to profit from the efforts of others. The SEC's position was simple. When people bought XRP, they expected the price to rise thanks to Ripple's efforts. The company spent money on marketing, on network development, on attracting partners. XRP buyers expected to make money from it. So XRP is a security. So Ripple was breaking the law. Ripple's defense was built on a different argument. XRP is just a digital asset, like gold, like oil, like any commodity. Yes, people speculate on its price, but that doesn't make it a security. Otherwise, you'd have to register every baseball card and every rare trainer with the SEC. Month after month, the parties traded blows. The SEC called witnesses. Ripple demanded disclosure of internal documents of the commission. At one point, the so-called Hinman letters surfaced. Internal correspondence from former SEC Director William Hinman, where he said Ethereum was not a security. The crypto community exploded. If Ethereum is not a security, why should XRP be? The trial dragged on. 2021, 2022, 2023. Each session generated new headlines and new speculation. The price of XRP bounced up and down depending on which side looked more convincing that week. And then came the 13th of July in the year 2023. Judge Annalisa Torres issued a judgment that turned the tide on cryptocurrency regulation. She didn't take a complete stand on either side. Instead, she drew a line that no one before her had dared to draw. Institutional sales of XRP directly to large investors? Yes, these were unregistered securities. Buyers reasonably expected to profit from Ripple's efforts. The SEC is right. But program sales on exchanges, ordinary people who bought XRP through Coinbase or Binance, here the judge said no. These buyers didn't know who they were buying from. They had no direct relationship with Ripple. They were simply trading a digital asset on the open market. It's not a security. For the first time in history, a U.S. court has recognized that the same token can be a security in one context and not in another. The context of the transaction determines everything. The crypto community celebrated. XRP is not a security, at least not always. The price of the token jumped 70% in one day. Exchanges started bringing XRP back to listings. But the SEC didn't give up. The commission filed an appeal. Ripple filed a cross appeal. The war continued. The next act played out in the year 2025, and this is where the story gets really interesting. In March, Ripple announced that the SEC was dropping its appeal, unconditionally. The commission, which is famous for its stubbornness, simply backed down. In May, the parties signed a settlement agreement. The final fine was $50 million. That's less than 4% of the $2 billion the SEC originally demanded. Ban on executives? Withdrawn. Injunction prohibiting Ripple from breaking the law in the future? Canceled. On the 22nd of August, 2025, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals officially dismissed the case. 5 years of legal battles ended in what many called a complete victory for Ripple. Garlinghouse was jubilant. He wrote on social media that justice had been served, that Ripple had been proven right, that the company could now focus on business development. But something about this story kept me on my toes. Why did the SEC back down? The commission has never been known for being soft. After Judge Torres' decision, the SEC still had a strong case. Institutional sales were still found to be a violation. Why the sudden generosity? I started digging. I discovered that in January of 2025, the SEC changed its leadership. The new administration was committed to reforming and updating the regulatory approach to the crypto industry. The official wording was that the dismissal of the case was not due to an assessment of its merits, but rather to a desire to contribute to the Commission's efforts to reform the regulatory approach. In other words, we don't admit we were wrong. We just decided to stop. But why Ripple in particular? That same year, the SEC closed cases against Coinbase, Dragon Chain, and several other cryptocurrency companies. However, none of them dragged on for 5 years. None drew that much attention, and none of these companies had such connections. SEC Commissioner Carolyn Crenshaw, the only person to vote against the settlement, issued a dissenting opinion. She wrote that the decision undermines the court's role in interpreting the securities laws, that it sets a dangerous precedent, that the commission is effectively abdicating its authority. But her voice was drowned in the chorus of congratulations. While the world was celebrating Ripple's victory, I wondered about something else. All these 5 years, while the trial was going on, while the headlines were screaming about the standoff between the SEC and Ripple, what was the company itself doing? I didn't find the answer in court documents. I found it in press releases that almost no one reads. I found it in reports from international organizations, in the minutes of committee meetings that most people don't even know exist. While everyone was watching the trial, Ripple was building something else. On the 9th of August 2023, while Ripple's lawyers were preparing for another round of court hearings, the Bank for International Settlements issued a short press release, a few paragraphs that didn't make it into any major news release. The BIS announced the creation of a working group on cross-border payments and interoperability. The aim of the group is to improve international payments and achieve the goals endorsed by the G20. 33 organizations were listed among the members of the group: SWIFT, MasterCard, Visa, and Ripple, Bank for International Settlements, an organization that most people have never heard of. But if you want to understand how the global financial system works, you need to know the name. The BIS is referred to as the Central Bank of Central Banks. It was founded in 1930 years in Basel, Switzerland. Its owners and clients are central banks of 63 countries, the Federal Reserve of the United States, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the People's Bank of China. All of them work through BIS. This organization sets standards for the world banking system. It coordinates central bank policy. It defines the rules of the game by which trillions of dollars operate every day. And now Ripple was sitting at the same table with these people. I began to track the company's activity outside the courtrooms. What I found was a picture that was difficult to explain by a simple desire to improve international payments. In 2021, Ripple launched the CBDC Private Ledger platform, a special solution for central banks wishing to create their own digital currencies. The platform is built on the same technology as the XRP ledger, but operates in a closed mode. The central bank gets full control over the issuance, distribution, and rules of use of its digital currency. In the same year, the company announced that it was in talks with more than 20 countries about possible CBDC cooperation. 20 countries! While the SEC was preparing a lawsuit, Ripple was negotiating with governments. Bhutan, the small kingdom in the Himalayas, has become one of the first partners. The Royal Monetary Authority of Bhutan announced a partnership with Ripple to improve digital and cross-border payments. The official goal: financial inclusion for a population, much of which is unbanked. Palau, an island nation in the Pacific Ocean. President Surango Whips Jr. personally announced a partnership with Ripple to create a national digital currency. Stablecoin pegged to the US dollar, first of its kind for a sovereign nation, Montenegro. The central bank of this Balkan country has chosen Ripple as a technology partner to develop the digital euro. The bank's governor, Radoje Jugic, spoke of its commitment to modern banking trends. Georgia. The national bank launched a pilot project, Digital GEL, with the participation of Ripple. Objective: to strengthen the public and financial sectors. Colombia. The Central Bank of the Republic announced a partnership with Ripple to improve high-value payment systems. Hong Kong. The monetary authority of this financial center has included Ripple in its CBDC research program. 6 countries, 6 central banks, 6 governments that have decided to build their digital future on the technology of a company on trial in the US. But that was only part of the picture. In August 2023, MasterCard announced the launch of the CBDC Partner Program. The aim of the program: to bring together key players to drive innovation in central bank digital currencies. Among the first partners are Consensus, Fireblocks, Giesecke, Plus, Devrient, and Ripple. Raj Damodharan, head of digital assets at MasterCard, explained it simply. Interoperability between different payment methods is a key component of a thriving economy. Central bank digital currencies need to be as convenient as other forms of money. That sounds reasonable, but what does it mean in practice? I found a Juniper research report from the year 2024. Ripple was ranked number 1 in CBDC and stablecoin companies. First place. Not Visa, not MasterCard, not IBM or Microsoft. Ripple, the company that the SEC tried to destroy, has become a leader in technology that 137 countries around the world are planning to adopt. And this is where I need to stop and explain what CBDC really is. Because most people hear central bank digital currency and think of something like electronic money in a bank account. That's not really the case. When you keep money in the bank, it is the bank's commitment to you. If the bank goes bust, you could lose your savings. Yes, there is deposit insurance, but it has limits. Your money is a record in the commercial bank's database. CBDC works differently. It is a direct obligation of the central bank, the digital analog of cash. Theoretically, safer. Theoretically, more efficient. But there is one fundamental difference from cash. Cash is anonymous. When you pay with a note, no one knows where it came from or where it will go next. This property of money has existed for thousands of years. It protects your privacy. It gives you freedom. CBDCs are not anonymous. Every transaction is recorded. Every movement of money can be traced. The central bank sees everything. But that's not the fun part. CBDC can be programmed. This is not a metaphor. It is a technical feature embedded in the architecture of these systems. I found a European central bank paper discussing the possibilities of programmable money, conditional payments that are only executed when predetermined conditions are met, automatic tax deduction for every purchase, restrictions on certain categories of goods, geographical restrictions on use. The official position of the ECB sounded reassuring. Programmability of money will be provided by financial institutions as an additional service. The central bank will not directly control what citizens spend their money on, but the technical possibility exists. And once created, the infrastructure can be used in different ways. Think of Shenzhen, October 2020. Digital yuan with an expiry date. The government didn't just hand out the money, it programmed it to disappear in a week. And it worked. People spent 90% of the money they got. Now imagine this technology on an economy-wide scale. A recession. The government issues maturing money to stimulate consumption. Inflation. Money is programmed to have a negative interest rate. It loses value every day you hold it. Sanctions. Your wallet simply stops working with certain counterparties. Congressman Tom Emmer, who introduced a bill in the U.S. against CBDC, put it this way: central bank digital currency is government-controlled programmable money. If created without the privacy protections of cash, the federal government will have the ability to monitor Americans' transactions and restrict politically undesirable activity. His bill passed through the House of Representatives in July 2025, but it only affects the United States, and 136 other countries continue to develop their own digital currencies, and Ripple is helping them do just that. In December 2024, the company launched RLUSD, a proprietary stablecoin linked to the US dollar, approved by the New York Department of Financial Services. Fully backed by dollar deposits and treasury bonds, the RLUSD Advisory Board reads like a list of former central bankers: Raghuram Rajan, former governor of the Reserve Bank of India; Kenneth Montgomery, former first vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston; Sheila Bair, former chairwoman of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. By November 2025, the capitalization of RLUSD exceeded $1 billion. Stablecoin has been approved for use in the Abu Dhabi Financial Center. It is integrated into the Ripple payment network, which covers more than 300 financial institutions around the world. I was looking at all of this and trying to understand the logic. Ripple has created technology for instant cross-border payments. This technology works. It saves banks billions of dollars. It makes transfers faster and cheaper for ordinary people. That's all good. But the same technology could be the basis for a system of total financial control. Central banks could use it to create programmable money. Governments can use it to track every transaction of their citizens. And Ripple is actively promoting these possibilities. Coincidence? A side effect? Or the original intent? I don't know. But I do know one thing. The infrastructure is already being built, and most people don't even realize it. There's a question I've been asking myself throughout this investigation. Let's say all of this is true. Let's assume that CBDCs really are building the infrastructure for total control. Let's say that Ripple is indeed helping to build the system. But why should I, the average person, worry about that? I pay my taxes. I don't break the law. I have nothing to hide. Why should I care if the government sees my transactions? It's an argument I've heard dozens of times, and every time I think of Ottawa. February 2022 year. Canadian truckers protest against COVID restrictions. You can agree with their position or not. You can consider them heroes or idiots. But they were doing what citizens of a democratic country have the right to do. They were protesting. On 14th February, Justin Trudeau's government invoked the Emergency Act for the first time in Canadian history. 3 days later, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland went to the press and announced that banks had begun freezing the accounts of people associated with the protests. No trial, no warning, no defense. 257 accounts, almost 8 million Canadian dollars. People wake up in the morning and find they can't pay their rent, can't buy food, couldn't put gas in their car. Their financial lives were switched off at the touch of a button. Freeland stood in front of the cameras and said, "The consequences are real, and they will be painful." Later, in January 2024, a Canadian court ruled that the application of the Emergency Act was unlawful. The government had overstepped its authority, but by then the protests were long over. The people whose accounts had been frozen had already lost their jobs, their homes, their businesses. The court decision did not give them back those 2 years. The system worked exactly as designed, fast, efficient, no questions asked, and it happened in Canada, in a country with a developed legal system, independent courts, and a free press. Imagine what will happen when such tools are in the hands of less scrupulous governments. However, there is no need to imagine. It is enough to look at China, the social credit system. A lot has been written about it, but few people realize how it works in practice. It's not just a rating that determines whether you can take out a loan. It is a system that links your behavior to your capabilities. Low social rating? You may not be allowed to buy plane tickets or high-speed train tickets. Your children may not get into a good school. Your face may be shown on public screens as the face of an unreliable citizen. The digital yuan fits perfectly into the system. Every transaction is tracked. Every purchase is analyzed. Spent too much on alcohol? It affects your ranking. Sent money to the wrong person? It affects your rating. Donated to an organization the authorities don't like? You understand. And the expiring money technology being tested in Shenzhen adds another layer of control. The state can do more than just monitor how you spend your money. It can make you spend it the way the state wants you to spend it. But China is far away, you will say. We have a different system. We have democracy. All right, let's talk about democracy. In 2025, the U.S. House of Representatives passed legislation prohibiting the Federal Reserve from issuing CBDC directly to citizens. Congressman Tom Emmer called the central bank's digital currency an obvious tool for financial surveillance, but this law only applies to retail CBDCs in the U.S. It does not ban wholesale digital currencies for interbank settlement. It does not prohibit U.S. companies from helping other countries create their own control systems. It does not stop Ripple. The European Central Bank continues to develop the digital euro. The official position: privacy will be protected. Privacy-preserving technologies, such as zero-disclosure proofs, will allow transactions to take place without revealing personal data. That sounds reassuring, but I found an interesting detail in the ECB documents. Tiered access. Different levels of privacy for different amounts. Small transactions can be anonymized. Large ones will be tracked. Who determines what is considered a small transaction? Who decides what threshold is the boundary between freedom and control? Today, it could be 1,000 euros. Tomorrow, in a crisis, it could be 100 or 10. Infrastructure once created does not disappear. It waits for its time. I think about how quickly norms change. In 2001, after the September 11th attacks, Americans agreed to the Patriot Act, temporary measures to combat terrorism, expanded powers for intelligence agencies, mass surveillance of communications. More than 20 years have passed. Temporary measures have become permanent. What seemed unthinkable in the year 2000 has become commonplace. We're used to it. CBDCs can go the same way. First, there's convenience, instant payments, low fees, financial inclusion for those without a bank account. Who's going to argue with progress? Then it becomes the norm. Cash is slowly going out of circulation. Not because they've been banned, it's just that fewer and fewer shops accept it. It's just that ATMs are becoming rare. It's just more convenient.
And then, at some point, in another crisis, the government decides it needs more control. For your own safety, for the stability of the economy, to fight terrorism, tax evasion, money laundering. Pick any reason you want, and the infrastructure is in place. All that's left is to push the button. I'm not saying it's inevitable. I'm not saying that Ripple is deliberately building a system of oppression. Perhaps Brad Garlinghouse genuinely believes he's making the world a better place. Perhaps the engineers working on the CBDC platform are only thinking about financial inclusion and fast payments. But intentions don't matter when the tool is made. A hammer can be used to build houses, or it can be used to smash heads. The hammer doesn't choose. The technology that Ripple is creating is a very powerful hammer, and it falls into the hands of people who historically have not been noted for their restraint in the use of power. The question is not whether current governments can be trusted. The question is whether all future governments can be trusted. All who will ever have access to this system, in all countries. For decades to come. History teaches us that the answer to that question is no. I started this investigation with simple curiosity. Why is XRP so different from other cryptocurrencies? I finished with a folder of documents and a feeling that is hard to describe in words. This is not a conspiracy theory. All the facts I've laid out can be verified. Ripple's partnerships with central banks are public. Membership in BIS working groups is documented. CBDC technical capabilities are described in official reports. The case of freezing accounts in Canada was covered by global media. It's not hidden information. It's on the surface. It's just that few people put it together in a coherent picture. Bitcoin was created to free money from the control of governments and banks. XRP was created to make this control more effective. Two projects born from the same technology lead in opposite directions. Where will the road Ripple is building lead? I don't know. Perhaps to a fairer and more inclusive financial system. Perhaps to a digital cage from which there will be no escape. The only thing I know for sure is that the mechanism is already in place. 137 countries are working on digital currencies. The infrastructure is being built right now, and most people will only find out about it when it becomes part of their daily lives. What happens next depends on how many people ask the right questions, and whether they are asked in time. My name is Mr. Darkweb. Thank you for listening to the end. On the 10th of November 2021, the world went mad. Bitcoin broke through $69,000. The whole world looked at the charts. Elon Musk pummeled the dogs, euphoria, and no one at all, noticed that 3 days earlier, in complete silence, the network that should have appeared back in 2015 and killed this circus 10 years ago was launched. Do you think Bitcoin's story ended in 2009? In the Ethereum white paper, read by millions, there is a reference to one paper, a work that Vitalik Buterin called brilliant, but was afraid to use. This technology was called Ghost. For 10 years, this Ghost dusted in academic archives while the market was building financial pyramids. But in the 21st year, without ICOs, without venture capital funds, and without marketing, the Ghost became flesh. My name is Mr. Darkweb, and today I will show you a project that came back from oblivion to finish the work of Satoshi Nakamoto. I've been reluctant to take on this topic for a long time. Right now, every second project is screaming revolution. Every third promises to kill Bitcoin, and every other one turns out to be just another scheme to siphon money from gullible people. I've seen enough to build up an immunity to loud claims. But this story is different. It did not begin with an anonymous manifesto or promises of super profits. It began in an academic laboratory at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, with a math problem that a PhD student solved for fun, and with a formula that could have changed everything if someone had paid attention to it. When I first came across Caspa, I did what I always do. I started looking for a catch. Where's the ICO? Where are the tokens for insiders? Where are the venture capital funds that bought up half the issue before launch? Nothing. Honest launch. No pre-mining. No reserved coins. Code in the public domain. It looks so clean, it seems suspicious. They don't do that in 2021. That's what they did in 2009 when Satoshi launched Bitcoin. And that's when I started digging deeper. What I found made me rethink the last 10 years of cryptocurrency history. It turned out that the technology behind Caspa existed long before it was launched. It was described in academic articles. It was quoted in the main Ethereum document. It was known by all the key players in the industry. And she was buried, not because it didn't work. It was because it seemed too complicated, too ambitious, too dangerous to the status quo. While the crypto world was drowning in scams, while people were losing their savings on endless ICOs, while exchanges were crashing one after another. The solution to the blockchain's main problem lay in the public domain. In academic journals that no one reads, in archives that no one looks at. 10 years. For 10 years, this technology has been waiting to happen while the industry has been doing anything but real innovation. This story is not about another prospect coin. I am not a financial advisor, and I am not going to give you investment advice. This story is about the most expensive mistake in the history of cryptocurrencies, about the technology that everyone knew and no one used, about people who worked in silence for 10 years while the rest of us were chasing fast money, and about the question that's been bugging me: how many more of these ghosts are gathering dust in the archives right now while we're looking at charts and buying pictures of monkeys? To understand how we got here, we have to go back to the beginning. The year 2013, Jerusalem. To a laboratory where a graduate student named Jonathan Sompolinsky was trying to solve a problem that Satoshi Nakamoto himself had left unsolved. The year 2013, Jerusalem. In a lab at Hebrew University sits a graduate student who is supposed to be a mathematician. His name is Yonatan Sompolinsky. He is 20-something years old, and he has no idea that in 8 years he will launch one of the most talked-about cryptocurrencies in the world. Right now, he's just trying to finish his master's program. His supervisor, Professor Aviv Zohar, suggests he look into Bitcoin. Sompolinsky declines. For someone with a mathematical background, Bitcoin seems too practical, too down-to-earth. He wants to solve real problems, like proving Goldbach's hypothesis and winning $1 million in prize money. Spoiler, he didn't prove the hypothesis. 6 months later, after unsuccessfully trying to make a mathematical breakthrough, Sompolinsky returns to Zohar. "Okay," he says, "let's look at this Bitcoin of yours. This decision will change the history of cryptocurrencies, although no one realizes it at the time." Zohar poses a simple question to Sompolinsky. What's wrong with Bitcoin? Not in the why is it bad sense, but in the sense of where are the mathematical limits? Where is the ceiling? What prevents the system from working faster, processing more transactions, scaling up? Sompolinsky starts digging. He finds a problem that Satoshi Nakamoto himself left unsolved. It's about speed. Bitcoin creates a new block about once every 10 minutes. That's slow. Very slow. If you buy coffee with Bitcoins, the seller has to wait at least 10 minutes to make sure the transaction goes through. And to be safe, all 60. Why can't you just speed up the creation of blocks? Because that's when the system breaks down. Here's the problem. When blocks are created too fast, they start competing with each other. Imagine two miners at different ends of the planet. Both find a solution and create a new block at the same time. But the network can only accept one of them. The second one becomes an orphan block. The miner's work is wasted. With slow block creation, this is not critical. Orphans are rare. But if you speed up the process, there will be a lot of them. A lot of them. The network will start wasting energy on blocks that will never make it into the chain. Security will go down. Centralization will increase because large mining pools with fast internet will get an advantage. Satoshi knew that. That's why he chose 10 minutes. It was a compromise between speed and security, and that compromise became the ceiling for the entire industry. Everyone who came after, Litecoin, Dogcoin, dozens of others, just moved the slider back and forth. A little faster, a little slower. But nobody solved the problem itself. Sompolinsky decided to give it a try. The idea that occurred to him was both simple and radical. What if you don't throw away the orphan blocks?
What if we used them? In a classic blockchain, a blockchain is exactly that, a chain. One block after another, a linear structure. If two blocks claim the same spot, one wins, the other disappears. Sompolinsky proposed a different model. Instead of a chain, a tree. Instead of an either-or choice, all blocks are accounted for, even those not included in the main branch. He called it Ghost, Greedy Heaviest Observed Subtree, a name only a mathematician could come up with. The essence of the protocol, instead of following the longest chain, as in Bitcoin, the network follows the heaviest branch, the one with the most computational work put into it, including side blocks. It changed everything. Now the orphan blocks were not wasted. They strengthened the security of the main branch. Miners were rewarded even if their block didn't get into the main chain. And most importantly, the system could be accelerated without losing reliability. In December of 2013, Sompolinsky and Zohar published a paper, an academic paper that was read by several hundred specialists, and one 19-year-old computer programmer from Canada. His name was Vitalik Buterin. In 2013, he was already well known in the crypto community, co-founder of Bitcoin Magazine, an active participant in forums, a man with ideas, big ideas. Buterin wanted to create more than just digital money. He wanted to build a world computer, a platform on which any blockchain-protected program could run. He would call it Ethereum, and for this platform, he needed speed. Bitcoin's 10 minutes per block is too slow for a world computer. Buterin wanted blocks every few seconds, but he understood the orphan problem. He realized that speeding up would kill security. And then he read the work of Sompolinsky and Zohar. In the Ethereum white paper published in 2014, there is an entire section dedicated to Ghost. Buterin calls the protocol a solution to the problem of fast blocks. He writes that Ghost will allow Ethereum to run much faster than Bitcoin without losing security. The Ghost protocol was supposed to be the heart of the world's second largest cryptocurrency. I had to. On the 30th of July in the year 2015, Ethereum launched. It was one of the most anticipated launches in the history of cryptocurrencies. Thousands of developers were preparing to build applications on the new platform. Investors poured in millions. The world was waiting for a revolution, and the revolution came, but not the one that was promised. When I pulled up the logs from that launch, when I read the developer discussions from that time, I realized something had gone wrong. Ghost, the very protocol that Buterin called genius, was in Ethereum, but not completely. The developers took only a part of the idea. They left the mechanism of uncle blocks, which allowed to take into account some side blocks, but the principle of chain selection itself, it wasn't touched. Ethereum continued to follow the longest chain rule, like Bitcoin, like everyone else. 2 weeks after launch, the developers have finally abandoned the full-fledged Ghost. The reason? Too complicated. Too many calculations to determine the heaviest branch. Too risky to change the foundation of a working system. They took the treasure map, looked at it, and put it back on the shelf. The Ghost remained a ghost, and Sompolinsky, he didn't give up. While Ethereum was gaining billions of dollars in capitalization, while the world was going crazy over ICOs and smart contracts, and Israeli scientists kept working on his idea, 2016, he publishes Spectre, a new protocol for rapid transaction confirmation. 2018 is Phantom, another iteration, another improvement. All this time he realized that something was missing, that the original Ghost was just the beginning.
that the real solution needed a different structure, not a chain, not a tree, something fundamentally different. And he found that something, but the world was too busy with other things to notice. The year is 2017. The world is going mad, but not like in 2021. Then it was euphoria, but in 17 it was a fever, gold fever. Only instead of gold, it was tokens. Instead of picks and shovels, white papers and smart contracts. Instead of the Klondike, it was Ethereum, ICO, initial coin offering, initial coin offering. If you didn't catch this time, you're lucky. If you did, you either got rich or lost everything. There was almost no third option. The idea seemed brilliant. Instead of spending years looking for investors, going through audits, proving the viability of a business, anyone could simply write a 20-page document, create an Ethereum token in 15 minutes, and announce a fundraiser. The money flowed. In 2017, projects raised more than $5 billion through ICOs. In the 18th year, almost $22 billion. People invested their savings in projects that had nothing but a beautiful website and promises. I remember those times. Every day is a new project. Every project is an Ethereum killer or a new Bitcoin. White papers written by copywriters for $200. Teams of stock photos. Roadmaps going back to the year 2025. And crowds of people willing to hand over money for the promise of a 100-fold profit. Remember BitConnect? BitConnect! Shouted the presenter on stage as thousands of people applauded. A classic pyramid scheme disguised as a crypto project. They promised up to 40% profit per month. In January 2018, the whole thing collapsed. $2.5 billion in capitalization evaporated in a matter of days. Pincoin and iFan, $660 million. The founders have disappeared. Centratech raised $25 million, even paid boxer Floyd Mayweather for advertising. The founders were arrested. Plexcoin promised 1,300% profit in a month. Regulators shut down the project a few weeks after its launch. And that's just the top. There are thousands of smaller projects underneath. Thousands of stories of people who invested everything and were left with nothing. What was Jonathan Sampolinsky doing at the time? He wrote scientific articles. While the crypto market was awash in money and scams, an Israeli scientist sat in his lab and worked on protocols. Spectre in 1916, Phantom in 18, mathematical proofs, peer review by colleagues, publications in academic journals, no ICOs, no tokens, no marketing. The contrast was so stark that it seemed unreal. On the one hand, projects that raised $100 million in a week on promises. On the other, a scientist who had spent 8 years working on a real solution to a real problem and hadn't made a cent on it. In 2018, Sampolinsky founded DAG Labs, a research company to turn his ideas into reality. They received $8 million in investment from Polychain Capital and several other funds. $8 million in 5 years of work. In a year when random projects raised more in a weekend. But Sampolinsky didn't care. He was up to the task. 2018-19, CryptoZyme. The ICO bubble has burst. Bitcoin fell from 20,000 to 3,000. Ethereum went from 1,400 to 80. 90% of the projects that raised millions disappeared. Just gone. Websites stopped working. Telegram feeds went silent. Founders deleted their accounts. Those who remained began to realize something was wrong with the system itself. Blockchains were slow. Transactions were expensive. Ethereum, which was supposed to be the world's computer, could barely keep up with the load. When CryptoKitties, a game about collecting digital kitties, was launched on the platform in late 17th, the network almost came to a standstill. Digital seals put down the world computer. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad. But the industry has a knack for forgetting. 2020th year, DeFi summer, new hype, new promises, new ways to lose money, decentralized finance. Sounds serious, doesn't it? Banks without banks, no credit checks, yields in the hundreds of % per annum. I looked at it and couldn't believe my eyes. People haven't learned anything. Yield farming, liquidity mining. The names changed, but the essence remained the same. Put money here, get a token, sell the token while it is worth something, get out before anyone else. It wasn't a revolution in finance. It was a game of musical chairs with cryptocurrencies. Yam finances a project that has racked up almost $500 million of blocked funds in 2 days. And then they found a bug in the code, and the whole thing collapsed. SushiSwap, an anonymous developer, created a copy of the popular protocol, raised over $1 billion, and then withdrew $13 million from the project's coffers. "I needed a holiday," he wrote afterwards, and dozens, hundreds of projects with names similar to the menu in a restaurant. Pickle, kimchi, hot dog, pizza. Each one promised something new. Every second one turned out to be either a scam or hacked. By the end of the year 2020, over $120 million had been stolen from DeFi protocols. And that's just what made the news. 2021, the time of the apes, NFT, non-fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens. The idea was an interesting one, to create a unique digital certificate of ownership for art, for music, for anything. A technology with real potential. But you know what it turned into? Bored Ape Yacht Club. Bored monkeys. 10,000 pictures with monkeys in different hats and glasses. Minimum price at the peak. Over $100,000 per picture. $100,000 for a JPEG file with a monkey drawn on it. People took out loans to buy these pictures. Celebrities posted them as avatars. Brands paid millions for club membership. And that was just the beginning. CryptoPunks are pixelated portraits measuring 24 by 24 points. Some sold for tens of millions of dollars. Artist Beeple sold a collage of his work for $69 million at a Christie's auction. It became the third most expensive work by a living artist. And then the madness began. Everyone wanted their own NFT project. Celebrities stamped collections. Influencers sold unique images to their subscribers. Networks were flooded with transactions. Commissions skyrocketed. Ethereum, created for the world computer, was used mainly to trade pictures of monkeys and pixel heads. The great technology that Buterin cited in his white paper, the Ghost Protocol, was lying in the archives. Nobody needed it. While the world was deciding which monkey was more beautiful, stop for a second and think about it. 2013 to 2021 year, 8 years. In that time, the crypto industry has lost billions of dollars on scams, experienced several bubbles and crashes, never solved the basic problem of speed and scalability, and all this time, the solution existed. It was described, it was published, it was quoted in the main document of the world's second cryptocurrency, but no one was looking that way, because there was no fast money there. There were scientific papers and mathematical proofs. There was a scientist from Jerusalem who spent years polishing his idea instead of launching another token. This is the real story of cryptocurrencies, not the ups and downs of the charts, not the millionaires and bankruptcies, but the missed opportunities, technologies that could have changed everything, and that got buried under a mountain of hype and greed. The autumn of 2021. The market is on the upswing again. Bitcoin is storming to new highs. NFT projects are raising millions. Every second starts his own meta-universe. And somewhere in Israel, a group of developers are getting ready to launch. No press releases, no adverts, no ambassadors or influencers. They spent 3 years turning academic papers into working code. They solved a problem that Ethereum couldn't solve in 15. They created what Polinsky had envisioned back in 13. Block DAG, not chain, not a tree, a directed acyclic graph. And the Ghost DAG protocol is an evolution of the very ghost that Buterin once called genius. On the 7th of November, 2021, at 6 o'clock in the evening UTC, the Caspa network went live. The world didn't notice it. 3 days later, everyone was looking at something else. Bitcoin was breaching 69,000. The euphoria had peaked. No one was thinking about some protocol from academic journals. No one knew that at that moment a whole other story was beginning. To understand what Polinsky did, you have to first understand why everything else didn't work. Imagine a queue in a bank. One teller, 100 customers, each one waiting for the previous one to be served. That's Bitcoin. Safe, secure, slow. If you want to speed it up, put in a second cashier. But then there's the problem. Who's first? Whose transaction is more important? 2 cashiers can process the same payment differently at the same time. Chaos. This is why Bitcoin operates with a single queue, one block after another. The chain. Ethereum tried to speed up the queue by shortening the time between blocks. Instead of 10 minutes, it was 15 seconds. But this created a new problem. Blocks started to collide, like cars at an intersection without a traffic light. Some of the miners' work was wasted. Buterin's solution, those uncle blocks, was a crutch. It compensated for the losses of miners, but did not solve the fundamental problem. The queue was still a queue. It just moved a little faster. Now imagine a different picture. Not a queue, an avalanche. Hundreds of snowballs flying down the mountain at the same time. They don't wait for each other. They don't line up. Each one rolls in its own way, but they all go in the same direction. Downhill. It's a block DAG. Directed acyclic graph. Directed acyclic graph. In a conventional blockchain, each block points to one previous block. Chain. Lineage. If 2 blocks are created at the same time, one survives, the other dies. In block DAG, each block can point to multiple previous blocks. Not a line. A web, not a chain, a web. Blocks don't compete, they coexist. Does it sound simple? On paper, yes. In practice, it's a nightmare. Because the question arises, in what order to process transactions? If blocks are created in parallel, if there is no single chain, how can we determine what came before? How to prevent double spending when a person tries to spend the same money twice? This is where the original ghost broke down. It's why Ethereum refused to implement it fully. It is too difficult to determine order in the chaos of parallel blocks. Polinsky has spent years tackling this challenge. Spectre. In 2016 was the first attempt. The protocol allowed fast confirmation of transactions, but did not provide full linear order of blocks. For simple payments, it was fine. For complex applications, not enough. Phantom in 2018 is the second iteration. Now the protocol could line up all the blocks in a clear sequence, but the algorithm was too heavy. computationally expensive, impractical for a real network, and that's when GhostDAG came along. The idea was to divide blocks into two categories, blue and red. Blue blocks are honest blocks created by honest miners. Red, suspicious blocks, possibly created by attackers or just late. How do you tell one from the other? Relationships. Honest miners see the network in roughly the same way. Their blocks link to similar previous blocks. They form a dense cluster, a group of well-connected nodes. Attacking or lagging miners create blocks that are poorly connected to the rest. They are out of the picture. GhostDAG finds the largest blue cluster and uses it as the basis for ordering. Red clusters are also included in the final ordering, but are placed later. This is how the protocol distinguishes honest work from attempts at manipulation. Now back to the avalanche. Hundreds of snowballs flying down the mountain. In a normal blockchain, you would try to line them up. This one first, this one second, this one third. It's a hopeless task when they fall at the same time. GhostDAG does things differently. It looks at the whole picture. It finds the mainstream, those snowballs that fly together in a tight group. Those are the blue ones, and those that fly separately, breaking out of the general movement, red. The mainstream becomes the backbone of order. The others are built around it. Result: you can create blocks every second. You can make 10 blocks per second. They won't compete. They will all go into the final order. Not a single one will go to waste. Bitcoin, 1 block per 10 minutes. Ethereum, 1 block per 15 seconds. Caspa at launch, 1 block per second. Now it's 10 blocks per second. The target is 100. It's not an incremental improvement. It's a different architecture. But there was another problem. All these protocols, Ghost, Spectre, Phantom, GhostDAG, existed only on paper, in scientific papers, in mathematical proofs. No one knew if they would work in the real world. In 2018, when Sompolinsky founded DAG Labs, work on implementation began. Turning formulas into code, theory into practice. 3 years of development, dozens of engineers, endless tests, and one principled solution, an honest launch. No ICO, no tokens for investors, no pre-mining, where founders pre-mine coins for themselves in advance. DAG Labs and their investors at Polychain have abandoned all of this. The code will be open source. Mining will be available to everyone from the first second. Like Bitcoin in 2009. 6 months before the launch, DAG Labs put the project into the public domain. It gave up all intellectual property rights. Caspa was no longer a product of the company. It became a public project. In a world where every crypto project was trying to squeeze the most money out of investors, it seemed like madness. Or as a principle. By the autumn of 2021, everything was ready. 8 years of research, 3 years of development, 4 iterations of the protocol, thousands of lines of code, and a technology that could process transactions faster than any existing proof-of-work blockchain, without losing security, without centralization, without the compromises that everyone else made. The ghost was ready. All that was left was to press the button. The 7th of November in the year 2021, Sunday, 6 o'clock in the evening, UTC. No press releases, no major media announcements, no countdowns on the website. Just a message in the Discord channel for developers. The network is up and running. Genesis block, Caspa's first block, appeared without fanfare. Several hundred people around the world launched their nodes. The miners connected to the network. The first transactions went live. It was so quiet it seemed like a mistake. This is not how crypto projects are launched in the year 2021. In year 2021, a launch is an event. It's $1 million marketing campaign. It's influencers, ambassadors, listings on exchanges on day one. It's a hype. COMPILATIon started up as if it were the year 2009. It was as if Satoshi Nakamoto had just posted the code and said, "It works. Use it." 3 days later, the world exploded. On the 10th of November, Bitcoin broke through $69,000, a historic high, euphoria. Every news channel, every blogger, every analyst talked only about it. Cryptocurrencies on magazine covers, predictions of 100,000 by the end of the year, 1 million by 2055. Twitter choked with joy. People posted screenshots of their briefcases, memes about Lamborghinis, "I told you so" jokes, and nobody at all was talking about any COMPILATIon. I remember the feeling. The whole market was looking in one direction, at the charts, at the price, at the green candles, and somewhere on the periphery, in the shadow of this madness, a network was quietly working, which was going to change the rules of the game. It was the perfect contrast. A feast during the plague, dancing on the deck of the Titanic. Pick any metaphor, it'll do. While the crowd was celebrating another peak of the bubble, something real was sailing away in the dinghy. And no one was looking in that direction. For the first fortnight, COMPILATIon worked. Blocks were being created every second. Transactions were going through. Miners were being rewarded. Everything was going according to plan. And then came the 21st of November. I read the logs from that day. I read the developers' Discord messages. And I realized what a horror it was. The network is up. It didn't slow down, didn't start glitching. It's up. Completely. Blocks stopped being created. Transactions stopped going through. Monitoring screens showed a deadline, a fortnight's work, 8 years of research, 3 years of development, and then silence. They found a critical bug in the code, a bug that caused the network to split. Different nodes saw a different picture. Consensus, the very agreement of all participants about the state of the system, broke down. Imagine you've been building a bridge for 8 years, checking every bolt, calculated every support, and then the bridge is open, the first cars drive over it, and it starts to crack. At this point, 99% of projects are doing one of two things. Option 1, they're lying. They say everything's under control, that it's just a temporary problem, that it'll be fixed soon. And they panic behind closed doors trying to figure out if it can be fixed at all. Second option, disappear, deleting accounts. They close Discord. Investors' money, if there was any, is already in the Bahamas. COMPILATIon chose a third way. On the 22nd of November, the day after the crash, the developers published a full report. What happened, why it happened, what they planned to do about it, and what they were going to do was radical. Restart, full network restart, a new Genesis block from scratch, but not exactly from scratch. They took a checkpoint, the last known stable state of the network before the crash. All balances, all transactions up to that point are preserved. The new Genesis block has been stitched with that state. And most importantly, they provided cryptographic proof that they did not take advantage of the situation. No hidden pre-mining, no manipulation of balances, total transparency. Stop and think about how unusual that is.
a project that has just suffered a catastrophic failure, which has no legal obligations to anyone, no ICO, no investors with contracts, which could just say, sorry, it didn't work out, and shut down. Instead, they publicly acknowledged the error, explained the technical reason, offered a solution, proved they weren't cheating, in a world where billion-dollar capitalization projects lie to investors' eyes, where founders disappear with their money, where technical problems is a euphemism for, we stole your money. CASPA has restarted, honest, openly, no attempt to cover my tracks. You know what's most ironic? This bug, this crash, this relaunch, they made CASPA stronger, not in the technical sense, in the sense of trust. Any project can talk about decentralization and honesty. Words are cheap. But when a crisis happens, then you can see who is who. The CASPA team has shown that it puts network security above its own reputation, that they are ready to admit mistakes instead of hiding them. Transparency is not a marketing slogan, but a principle. It was a trial by fire, and they passed it. After restarting, the network worked stably. The bug was fixed. Blocks came every second again, then every half a second, then 10 blocks per second. CASPA started doing what it was created to do, quietly, without pomp. While the rest of the market was going through another cycle of euphoria and collapse. By the end of the year 2021, a few thousand people knew about CASPA. Enthusiasts, technicians, those who read academic articles and look at code, not graphs. The price of the coin was close to zero. No listing on major exchanges, no media presence, but the network worked. Every day, every block, every second. The ghost took on flesh and began to gain strength. When I started this investigation, I was looking for a catch. An honest launch without an ICO? Suspicious? Academic roots instead of a marketing machine? Strange. A team that gave up the rights to the project and handed it over to the community? Almost unbelievable. I am used to the fact that in the crypto world, beautiful words hide the ugly truth. That behind every revolutionary project is someone's wallet. That decentralization is a meme, not a reality. CASPA broke this pattern, not because its creators are saints, not because they don't want money, but because they understand something important. Real value is created differently. Let's look at the numbers. Bitcoin, 1 block per 10 minutes, 7 transactions per second max, 2,099-year-old technology. Ethereum, 1 block per 15 seconds, about 30 transactions per second. Switch to proof of stake, abandoning mining. CASPA, 10 blocks per second, hundreds of transactions per second. Proof of work is preserved. Target is 100 blocks per second. It's not evolution, it's a different species. Bitcoin is a tank, slow, clumsy, but virtually invulnerable. It was created for one purpose, to be digital gold, and it's doing it. Ethereum is a Swiss knife. It tries to do everything. Smart contracts, DeFi, NFT, world computer, and it chokes under the strain. Commissions skyrocket every time the network becomes popular. CASPA is a backbone, built not to store value or run applications, built for speed, for flow, for scale. But technical specs are only half the story. The second half is how this technology came to be. In the year 2013, no one paid Sompolinsky for the ghost study. It was academic work, pure science, trying to solve a problem that's interesting to solve. In 2015, Ethereum could take this technology for free. It was in the public domain, but they took the easier route. In 2017, when the whole world was going ICO crazy,
Sampolinsky continued to write academic articles. Spectre, Phantom, years of work with no guarantee of results. In 2021, when it was possible to launch a token and raise hundreds of millions on an HGAP, the team chose an honest launch. No pre-mine, no tokens for insiders. It's not a business model, it's a principle. I often think about what separates real innovation from noise. Noise is when a project raises money on promises, when marketing is more important than the product, when the goal is to sell a token at a higher price and get out. Innovation is when someone spends years solving a problem that nobody asked them to solve, when code is written not for investors, but to work, when success is measured not by the price of a coin, but by the number of blocks per second. The crypto industry has forgotten that. It turned into a casino with extra steps, an endless cycle of pumps and dumps, into a competition of marketers, not engineers. And against this backdrop comes a project that does everything wrong. It's just like old times. No hype, no promises, just code that works. I don't know what will happen to Caspa in 5 years. Maybe it will become the basis for a new financial infrastructure. Maybe it will remain a niche project for enthusiasts. Maybe something even better will emerge. But I do know one thing. The Caspa story is not a coin story. It's a story about how progress works. Someone solves a problem that everyone thinks is unsolvable, publishes the result. The world ignores it. Years pass. The world continues to ignore, busy with more important things. Another hype, another bubble, another monkeys for $100,000. And then someone takes that forgotten idea and brings it to life. Without fanfare, without permission, just because they can. And the world begins to change, not with a bang, but with the quiet hum of running servers. How many more solutions are lying in the archives right now as we look at the charts? Caspa has shown that such solutions exist, that they can be found, that they can be realized. The Ghost protocol has been gathering dust in academic journals for 8 years. 8 years. While the industry was losing billions on scams, while blockchains were choking under the strain, while everyone was looking for the next big thing. And the next big project was lying in plain sight, in the public domain, free of charge. No one was looking for him. $625,000. That's how much the most powerful tax service in the world is willing to pay to hack Monero. Every second in the world there's a transaction that no bank, no intelligence agency, no court can see. Money moves from point A to point B, and no one knows who the sender and who the receiver are. My name is Mr. Darkweb, and today I'm going to tell you a story about money that can't be traced, about people who disappear without a trace, and a war that the world's most powerful nations are losing to lines of code. I first heard about Monero in 2017, when the FBI shut down the largest black market in the history of the internet. At that time, the news was about confiscated bitcoins, about arrests, about the victory of justice. But there was one detail that almost no one noticed. In the agent's reports, there was a sum of money that was never found. The money just vanished. It was as if it never existed. I started digging, and the deeper I dived, the clearer I realized. This is not just another cryptocurrency. It's something completely different. If Bitcoin is digital gold, then Monero is digital cash that is transferred in suitcases in dark alleys. Only this alley is the size of the entire planet, and the suitcase is invisible to any surveillance cameras. In September of 2020, the Internal Revenue Service, the same IRS that once put Al Capone away for not paying taxes, published an official document. It wasn't a press release, not a warning. It was a reward. $625,000 to anyone who could crack Monero security and provide a tool to track transactions. Think about it. A government that spends billions on surveillance, that has access to the best cryptographers in the world, that can push any company and get any data. This government has publicly admitted its powerlessness and has put a price on solving the problem. It's been over 5 years. The award is still hanging. No one's received it. I contacted people from different corners of the story. Former developers who only spoke to me through encrypted channels, with blockchain analysts who have spent years trying to find a gap, with journalists who have investigated the biggest Darknet cases, and each of them, sooner or later, uttered the same phrase: Monero is different. No better, not worse, different. Bitcoin was created as an alternative to the banking system, transparent, decentralized, free from control. But its creator, the enigmatic Satoshi Nakamoto, made one fundamental mistake. He made all transactions public. Yes, the names are hidden behind the addresses, but the addresses themselves are in plain sight. Every transfer is recorded on the blockchain forever. And if someone finds out that a particular address belongs to you, your entire financial history becomes an open book. Intelligence agencies quickly realize this. Companies like Chainalysis have built entire empires on tracking Bitcoin transactions. Today, Bitcoin is arguably the most transparent currency in human history. Each Satoshi can be traced from its creation to its current owner. But someone looked at it and thought differently. Someone realized that true freedom is not just independence from banks. It's the right to privacy, the right to make transactions in such a way that no one, not the state, not corporations, not hackers, can find out how much money you have and where you send it. This someone called himself Nicholas Van Saberhagen. And that's where it gets interesting, because nobody knows who he is. Nobody's seen his face. No one has heard his voice. He came out of nowhere, published a document that overturned the notion of privacy in the digital world, and disappeared, just like Satoshi Nakamoto. Coincidence? Maybe. But when I started comparing the facts, I got a strange feeling. The same feeling you get when you look at two different photographs and suddenly realize that they are the same person, just wearing different masks. On the 12th of December, 2012, remember this date, a document called Crypto Note appeared online. Its author, Nicholas Van Saberhagen, proposed a solution to a problem that Satoshi didn't even consider a problem. He described a system in which each transaction automatically hides the sender, recipient, and amount, not at an additional cost, not at the will of the user, by default. It was mathematically beautiful, cryptographically flawless, and absolutely devastating to any surveillance system. But the road from white paper to real money was a winding one, and very messy. Because the first people to use Saberhagen's technology weren't idealists or freedom fighters. They were crooks. And what happened next is more like a crime thriller than a technology story. To understand Monero, you must first understand the mud from which it was born, and why revolutions sometimes start with betrayal. There are names that the whole world knows. Satoshi Nakamoto is one of them. The man who created Bitcoin and disappeared, leaving billions of dollars untouched. Books have been written about him. Documentaries have been made. Journalists and intelligence agencies are looking for him. Every year someone announces that they have finally discovered his identity, and every time it turns out to be a lie or a delusion. But there's another name that almost no one knows: Nicholas von Saberhagen, the man who may have fixed Satoshi's biggest mistake and disappeared just like that, without a trace, silently, forever. When I first came across his name, I thought he was some kind of European cryptographer, Dutch maybe, or German. The name sounds solid, academic, like a professor from an old university. But the more I looked, the less I found. No photos, no interviews, no mention before 2012, and almost none after 2013. It was as if a man had materialized out of thin air, written one of the most important documents in the history of cryptography, and vanished back into the void. On the 12th of December 2012, a document called Crypto Note appeared online, 17 pages that changed everything. Saberhagen began with a simple statement: Bitcoin is broken. Not technically, philosophically. The system that promised freedom from snooping has actually created the perfect tool for snooping. The public blockchain is not a defense of privacy. It's its grave. Then came the maths. Ring signatures, one-time addresses, hidden transaction amounts. I will not burden you with formulas. There are specialists for that. But the point was revolutionary. Saberhagen proposed a system where even if you knew the address of a wallet, you couldn't know how much money was in it. Even if you intercept a transaction, you can't tell who sent it and who received it. Each transfer is automatically mixed in with the others, creating a mathematical maze that is impossible to get out of. Imagine a room in which 100 people are passing envelopes to each other at the same time. You stand at the door and try to figure out who passed what to whom. But all the envelopes are the same. All the people are moving chaotically. And every second, someone is going in and out. This is a very simplified metaphor for what crypto note technology does. 10 months later, on the 17th of October 2013, the second version of the document appeared, refined, polished, ready for use, and after that, silence. Nicholas van Saberhagen never appeared in public again. Almost. In the year 2015, at the P2P Financial Systems Conference, he was scheduled to speak. People were waiting. At last they would see the face of the man who challenged the entire global financial control system. But instead of a live presentation, the organizers received a Skype call with an altered voice, so distorted that no one could make out a word. The recording of that call was never published. A few years ago, someone even offered a reward for a copy. To no avail. And this is where the story gets really weird. I spent months comparing everything I could find about Saberhagen and Nakamoto, and the longer I looked, the more I saw coincidences. Not evidence. Coincidences. But there were too many to just dismiss. Both used pseudonyms that sound like real names. Both came out of nowhere with a ready-made, well-thought-out solution. Both published white papers and disappeared without trying to capitalize on their inventions. Both wrote in English, but with distinctive features. The British spelling of words like favor. The use of the abbreviation can't in an academic text, which is atypical for scientific publications. The same sentence structure. The same way of drawing diagrams. Black and white lines, solid and dotted. A team of researchers from Monero Outreach conducted a stylometric analysis of both papers using specialized software. The result, the probability that the author of CryptoNote is also the author of the Bitcoin white paper is higher than the probability of authorship of any of the 15 known cryptocurrency experts. That's not proof. It's a statistic. But statistics make you wonder. There's something else. Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared in 2011. CryptoNote appeared in 2012. It's like someone took a break, rethought their work, and started again, fixing the mistakes of the first version. By the year 2012, Satoshi, if he was watching his brainchild, had already seen trouble. Bitcoin had been taken over by mining farms with powerful graphics cards, destroying the dream of equality. Blockchain became a surveillance tool for companies like Chainalysis. Intelligence agencies learned how to track transactions. Everything Bitcoin was created for, freedom, privacy, independence, was threatened. What would the creator do when he sees his brainchild turning into the opposite of what he intended? Perhaps he would try to fix it, start over, under a different name. I'm not claiming that Saberhagen is Satoshi. I have no proof. But I am saying there are too many coincidences. The MO is too similar, too logical a sequence of events. If Satoshi built a glass house, Saberhagen built a bunker. But even the most advanced technology is useless without the people to bring it to life. And the first people to take on this task were not what you might call freedom fighters. They were crooks. Greedy, cunning, and very clever scammers. They took Saberhagen's brilliant idea and tried to use it for one of the biggest scams in the history of cryptocurrencies. Their project was called Bitcoin, and what happened next changed everything. March 2014. A new user appears on the Bitcoin Talk forum. An unremarkable account created just yesterday. And this account tells the world amazing news. He accidentally discovered a cryptocurrency that has been around for 2 years. It's called Bitcoin. Built on the revolutionary CryptoNote technology, completely anonymous, and almost nobody knows about it. Sounds too good to be true. It was. The community reacted instantly. People started looking into the Bitcoin blockchain, and what they discovered looked like a poorly concealed crime. 82% of all coins had already been mined. Not 10%, not 20, 82. That meant that someone, the creators, their friends, insiders, controlled the vast majority of the entire currency before ordinary people even knew it existed. The creators of Bitcoin were not confused. They offered an explanation. The coin has really existed since 2012. It just circulated on the Darknet, among a narrow circle of the initiated. 2 years of secret mining in the shadows. That's why so many coins have already been mined. It's not a pre-mine. It's just, an early start. The story was beautiful and completely false. Researchers started digging deeper. They checked digital signatures of documents, file creation dates, and metadata. It turned out that the Bitcoin white paper was created not in 2012, but in 2014. Links in the document led to forum posts, which appeared only in 2013. The software used to create the files was released in 2013. The whole story about the 2-year existence was a lie. But here's the interesting thing. The technology was real. CryptoNote worked exactly as Saberhagen described. Ring signatures, one-time addresses, mathematical security, it all worked perfectly. Fraudsters somehow gained access to the ingenious design and tried to profit from it in the most primitive way possible. Who was behind Bitcoin? To this day, no one knows for sure. There is a version that Bitcoin developers were connected to Saberhagen himself or his team. There is a version that they simply stole the technology. The names that appeared in the documents, Johannes Meyer, Maurice Planck, Max Jameson, are almost certainly pseudonyms. Some of them suspiciously resemble the names of famous physicists. It's as if someone was making fun of future researchers. The forum was boiling. Some shouted that it was an obvious scam and should be kept away. Others objected. Yes, the creators are crooks, but the technology is revolutionary. Why not take the code and run an honest version? On the 9th of April, 2014, a new post appeared on the same Bitcoin Talk forum. A user under the nickname Thankful for Today announced the launch of Bitmonero, an honest fork of Bitcoin. No pre-mining, fair distribution, clean start. The community breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, someone took matters into their own hands. Developers, enthusiasts, and the curious, everyone reached out to the new project. On the 18th of April, Bitmonero officially launched. It seemed like the worst was over. It seemed like. The problem started almost immediately. Thankful for Today was behaving strangely. He would disappear for days without warning, critical for a project that had just launched and needed constant attention. He ignored suggestions from the community. He made decisions on his own without discussing them with anyone. And then he proposed something that made the community's jaw drop. Merged mining with Bitcoin. Think about it. People came to Bitmonero precisely because they wanted to get away from the Bitcoin scam. And now the founder is proposing to link the two projects again. This was either incredibly stupid or something else. Suspicion started to grow. Some community members noticed that Thankful for Today appeared on the forum almost simultaneously with the promotion of Bitcoin. His communication style was similar to that of other suspicious accounts. A conspiracy theory? Maybe. But too many things were coming together. What if Bitcoin was only the first part of the plan? What if the scammers knew in advance that they would be exposed and prepared a backup? Launch an honest fork under the control of their own man. Wait for it to gain popularity, and then merge mining, mix audiences, and continue to make profits? There's no proof, but there is logic. At the end of April in the year 2014, what is known in the history of Monero as a revolution took place. A group of developers and community activists openly opposed Thankful for Today. They demanded to abandon the idea of unified mining. They demanded transparency in decision-making. They demanded decentralization of management. Thankful for Today refused. Then they did what they do in the open source world when the leader no longer represents a community. They forked the project. They took the code, created a new repository, and continued development without it. Bitmonero became Monero, coin in the Esperanto language. Thankful for Today didn't give up. He launched his own project called Phantom Coin with the very same merge mining with Bitcoin. The project failed. It was pumped, dumped, and forgotten. Thankful for Today himself disappeared from the public space forever. This was a key moment. The first proof that Monero is not someone's personal project. It's a community. A living organism that can defend itself against parasites, even if the parasite is the founder. The new team was led by people who only called themselves by their nicknames. Smooth, Taco Time, Fluffy Pony, Noodle Doodle. 7 people who formed the first core of developers. They made a rule. No one-on-one control. All decisions are by consensus. All changes through discussion. Monero was born out of mud. Out of scam. Out of deception. Out of betrayal. But that's what made it stronger. The community knew from day one that no one could be trusted, that any leader could turn out to be a fraud, that the only defense was to decentralize not only the code, but also the power. Some would say, what difference does it make where the technology came from? If it works, it works. But I think the origin is important. It explains why Monero is the way it is. Paranoid, distrustful, ready to cut off a rotting limb at a moment's notice for the survival of the whole organism. By the summer of 2014, Monero was a small, almost invisible cryptocurrency. A few thousand users, a handful of enthusiasts. No big announcements or promises, but the code worked. The transactions were invisible, and someone in the dark corners of the internet was beginning to notice. The year is 2016. Somewhere in the depths of the internet, behind layers of encryption and anonymous networks, a machine is at work. It doesn't stop for a second. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thousands of sellers, hundreds of thousands of buyers, millions of dollars in circulation. Alphabay, the largest black market in the history of mankind. If Silk Road was a pioneer, a clumsy trailblazer that proved the very possibility of anonymous trading, then Alphabay has become an empire, 10 times the size of its predecessor, over 400,000 users, 300,000 product lines, from drugs to forged documents, from stolen data to hacking tools, $600,000 to $800,000 of transactions every day. And that empire had one serious problem: Bitcoin. Yes, the same Bitcoin that once seemed like the perfect currency for shady business. By 1916, intelligence agencies had learned how to track it. Chainalysis had contracts with the FBI, DEE, Interpol. Every Bitcoin transaction left a trail. Not immediately, not instantly. But sooner or later, analysts got to the final address. And from the address to the person. Alphabay administrators understood this better than anyone else. They'd seen competitors go down. How sellers who thought they were safe were arrested. How a blockchain that was supposed to protect turns into evidence. In August 2016, Alphabay announced support for a new payment method, Monero. It was the beginning of a new era. To understand why this is so important, you need to understand how the Monero defense works. Not at the level of formulas, at the level of logic. Imagine a wire transfer. You send money from your account to someone else's account. The bank sees everything. Who sent it, who received it, how much, when. That information is stored forever. Anyone who gets access to the bank's database, an investigator, a hacker, a corrupt employee, will see the full picture. Bitcoin works similarly, except instead of a bank, it's a public blockchain. All transactions are public. Yes, instead of names, there are addresses, but an address can be linked to a person. Through the exchange where he bought coins, a shop where he paid for something, a data leak. Once you link an address to a person, you see the whole story, past and future. Monero breaks this logic on 3 levels. The first level is the sender. When you make a transaction in Monero, it is automatically mixed with several others. The technology is called ring signatures. Your transfer becomes part of a group. Who exactly in the group sent the money? It's mathematically impossible to determine. It's like 10 people putting notes in the same box at the same time, mixing them up and taking them back out. You don't know who took whose note. The second level is the recipient. Every time Monero is sent to you, the system automatically creates a new disposable address. Even if you publicly announce your primary address, no one can see the incoming payments. They all go to different unrelated ghost addresses. The third level is the amount. Since 2017, Monero hides the size of transactions as well. You can see that a transfer has taken place, but you don't know exactly how much was sent. $1? $1,000,000? It's impossible to tell. 3 layers of defense. 3 walls between you and any observer. And it's all there by default. You don't need to configure anything. You don't need to understand the technology. Every transaction on the Monero network is protected automatically. No wonder the Darknet has fallen in love with this coin. By the year 2017, Monero had become the standard, not an optional extra, the main currency. The Sodinokibi Group, one of the largest ransomware teams in the world, publicly announced all ransom payments are now only accepted in Monero. Bitcoin is no longer of interest to them. It's too risky. On the 5th of July, 2017, Thai police broke into a luxury home in Bangkok. Alexander Kazis, a 25-year-old Canadian, was arrested at breakfast. His laptop was standing open. On the screen was the Alphabay admin panel. Operation Bayonetta, a joint effort between the FBI, DEA, Europol, and police from several countries, was a success. The largest black market in history was shut down. A week later, Kazis was found dead in his cell. The official version was suicide. The special services celebrated victory. Press conferences, statements, statistics. Millions of dollars in cryptocurrency seized. Hundreds of sellers identified. Thousands of transactions traced. But there was one figure that was hardly talked about. When analysts started to look into Alphabay's finances, they came across a black hole. Some of the funds just disappeared. It wasn't spent. It wasn't withdrawn to known wallets. It existed, judging by the volume of trading, but it could not be found. That was the money in Monero. Kazis' bitcoins were found quickly. He didn't care too much about security. He used a personal email to register, kept passwords in the open, drove a Lamborghini around the streets of Bangkok. His Bitcoin wallets were empty formalities. Investigators traced every transaction. With Monero, it was different. Investigators knew the money was there. They saw records of transactions that were paid for with this cryptocurrency, but the funds themselves were ghosts. No senders, no recipients, no amounts. Just the fact of existence, and emptiness instead of details. It's been a few years. The Alphabay case is officially closed, but that money was never found. Maybe it's still sitting in some wallet. Maybe it's long since spent. We'll never know. In the year 2021, something unexpected happened. A user under the nickname D-Snake appeared on Darknet forums and announced, "Alphabay is back." He confirmed his identity with an old cryptographic key, the same one he used as the administrator of the original marketplace. The new Alphabay is still in operation, with one crucial difference: it only accepts Monero. No Bitcoin, no alternatives, just invisible money. I am not telling this story to promote the Darknet or romanticize crime. I tell it because it shows reality. The technology works, not in theory, not in laboratory conditions, in the most extreme circumstances under pressure from the best investigators in the world. The intelligence community understands that. That's why the IRS announced the award. That's why Chainalysis still hasn't added Monero to its tools. That's why governments started acting differently, not trying to crack the code, but trying to destroy the very possibility of using it. But more on that later. The important thing to realize now is different. Monero has proven its resilience. It has survived the closure of the largest marketplace, the arrests of thousands of users, and millions of dollars in investigations. And it has remained impenetrable. But every project has a face. A person who speaks on camera, answers journalist questions, and presents the technology to the world. For Monero, The person with the nickname Fluffy Pony became such a face. And what happened to him was another proof of the main principle of Monero. No leader should be irreplaceable, because any leader can disappear. On the 20th of July, 2021, a private plane landed in Nashville, Tennessee, a routine maintenance stop for refueling. The plane was flying from New York to Los Cabos, Mexico. On board was one of the most famous people in the world of cryptocurrencies, Ricardo Spagni, nicknamed as Fluffy Pony, former lead developer of Monero, the face of the project for 5 years. When the plane stopped, several black cars pulled up. The plainclothesmen showed an arrest warrant. Spagni was handcuffed at the gangway. The news spread across the cryptocurrency community in a matter of hours. Fluffy Pony has been arrested. The creator of Monero is in jail. The end of the project? But the reality was more complicated and more interesting. To begin with, Spagni was not the creator of Monero. He joined the project in 2014, just after Thankful for Today was overthrown. He was one of 7 members of the original team. Over time, he became the most public of them all. He gave interviews, spoke at conferences, and hosted social media, but he was never the sole leader. It's important. Remember this moment. The charges against Spagni had nothing to do with Monero, nothing at all. The case concerned the events of 2009 to 2011 years, when he worked as an IT manager for the South African company Cape Cookies. According to the prosecution, Spagni created fictitious accounts from non-existent contractors and transferred money to his personal accounts. The amount is about $100,000, 378 counts of fraud, forgery of documents. Spagni denied guilt. His lawyers called the case fatally flawed and pointed to procedural irregularities. The trial dragged on for more than a decade. Arrests, releases, postponed hearings. In 2021, South African authorities requested extradition, and the U.S. feds complied. But here's what struck observers. Spagni was arrested on a private jet. He had on him a watch worth $800,000. Investigators cited significant cryptocurrency assets that make him prone to flight. A man accused of stealing $100,000 flew on private jets and wore a watch worth nearly $1 million. Where does the money come from? Formally, from various business projects. Spagni was an entrepreneur, an investor, and participated in several startups. But many in the community wondered whether this was due to his role in Monero. Monero is an open source project. No one gets paid for development. There is no central office, no corporation, no shareholders, but there is a system of voluntary donations, grants from the community, consulting contracts, and of course, each developer has their own coins. Spagni has never hidden the fact that he owns Monero, and in the years that he was the face of the project, the value of these coins grew hundreds of times. A man who in 2014 believed in an idea enough to devote years of his life to it could be very, very rich by 2021. The irony of the situation has not escaped critics. The man who promoted financial privacy technology was caught committing trivial fraud with paper accounts, like a safecracker caught stealing change from a cash register. But the main question was different. What will happen to Monero? In traditional corporate logic, a CEO's arrest is a disaster. Shares fall, partners flee, competitors gloat. A project without a leader is a ship without a captain. With Monero, something opposite has happened. On the day of Spagni's arrest, the price of Monero remained virtually unchanged. development continued without interruptions. Updates were released on schedule. The community didn't even discuss the incident much, except in the context of, "We hope he does well." The fact is that Spagni stopped being the lead developer back in 2019-19. He had officially stepped away from the day-to-day management of the project, remaining only a public spokesman. And even that role was more symbolic than functional. By the time of his arrest, Monero was run by dozens of developers scattered around the world. Most of them are anonymous. The project has no office that can be shut down, no server that can be confiscated. There is no person to arrest to stop the system. This is true decentralization, not a marketing slogan, reality. Remember what happened to Telegram when Pavel Durov was detained in France, or with WikiLeaks after Assange's arrest. In both cases, the projects continued to exist, but received a serious blow, because they depended on specific people. Monero is built differently. It has been tested for the bus factor, a term from the development world meaning, how many key people must a bus hit for a project to die? For Monero, the answer is, not enough everyone, because there are no irreplaceable people. Spagni's story continued. In September 2021, an American court released him because the South African side failed to provide the necessary documents in time. In 2022, the extradition did take place. Spagni returned to South Africa and stood trial. As I write these lines, the case is still ongoing, but it doesn't matter for the history of Monero. The project has proved the main thing. It does not depend on one person. You can cut off Hydra's head and it will live on. Moreover, Spagni's arrest became a kind of publicity. Look, Monero supporters said, the man was not arrested for cryptocurrency, not for helping criminals, not for money laundering, for old charges unrelated to the project in any way, and even that couldn't stop the network. If the authorities could have charged Spagni with something related to Monero, they would have, but they couldn't, because it's not a crime to own, develop, and use Monero. Not yet. And here we come to the final chapter of this story. The war that's going on right now. States trying to destroy what they can't control. Not through code, through rules, not through hacking, through prohibitions. Because if you can't breach a wall, you can try to make it illegal to build one. On the 6th of February 2024, Binance, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world, published a short announcement. Monero is being delisted. Trading will stop on the 20th of February. Withdrawal of funds ready until the 20th of May. After that, conversion to stablecoins if you have time. If not, your problems. The price of Monero collapsed by 30% in 24 hours, the lowest in 20 months. Binance did not explain the reasons. The standard wording is that the coin no longer meets the listing requirements. It was not specified what requirements were violated, but everyone understood what we were talking about. A month before that, OKX made a similar decision. Even earlier, Huobi. Kraken removed Monero for European users. Japanese exchanges banned it back in 2018. South Korea and Australia followed in 2020. According to the analytical company Kaiko, in 2024 year, there were 60 delistings of private cryptocurrencies, a record since 2021 year. Monero suffered the most. The number of deletions increased 6 times compared to the previous year. It's not a coincidence. It's a strategy. Back to the IRS award, $625,000 for cracking Monero. The program was announced in September 2020.
The deadline for submitting applications was the 16th of September of the same year. 2 companies were awarded contracts: Chainalysis and Integra FEC. It's been over 4 years. Chainalysis brags about tools for analyzing Lightning Network. There is silence about success with Monero. Integra FEC hasn't published anything. If one of them had cracked Monero's security, we would know about it. It would be the news of the decade. The award is still outstanding. And that's when states change tactics. If you can't break the code, you can destroy the infrastructure, stop people from buying and selling, strangle them economically. The mechanism is simple. Exchanges want to operate legally. For this, they need licenses. Licenses are issued by regulators. Regulators require compliance with anti-money laundering rules. These regulations require that transactions can be tracked. Monero can't be tracked, so Monero is incompatible with the rules. So exchanges have to choose between Monero or a license. The choice is obvious. The European Union has adopted the MiCA regulation, markets in crypto assets. There is no direct ban on private cryptocurrencies, but there are transparency requirements that make their support almost impossible. The UAE has introduced similar rules. Singapore, Hong Kong, and the UK are moving in the same direction. It's not a ban on Monero. It's a ban on its usability. And guess what? Monero still works. Decentralized exchanges like Bisq do not require identity verification. Peer-to-peer platforms allow you to buy directly from other people. Atomic swaps allow you to exchange bitcoins for Monero without intermediaries. According to Kaiko, platforms with minimal regulatory oversight, Poloniex, Yobit, now control nearly 40% of private coin trading volume. In 2021, it was 18%. States are pushing Monero out of the legal field. Monero is going underground, back where it was born, where it feels at home. The question arises, is financial privacy worth protecting at all? Maybe the regulators are right. Maybe transparency is a good thing and anonymity is a loophole for criminals? I won't tell you what to think, but I will tell you something. Every time you pay with your card, the bank knows what you've bought, where, when. This information is stored, analyzed, traded. Every time you transfer money, the system records the sender and receiver. Every time you withdraw cash, the ATM records your face. Cash, the last bastion of financial privacy, is slowly disappearing. Sweden has all but given up on them. India tried to seize large denominations overnight. China is introducing a digital yuan with full control over every transaction. We are moving towards a world where every purchase you make is an open book, where an algorithm knows more about your finances than you do, where an unwanted person can be disconnected from the economy at the touch of a button. Monero is insurance, not for criminals, for everyone. A right to financial privacy written in code. A right that cannot be revoked by vote or decree. Yes, it's a right that criminals use, like they use cash, cars, the internet. The tool is not responsible for the person holding it. Let's go back to the beginning. $625,000. That's what the world's most powerful tax authority is willing to pay for cracking Monero. The reward was announced over 4 years ago. It's still unclaimed. Every second in the world there is a transaction that no bank, no intelligence agency, no court of law can see. Money moves from point A to point B, and nobody knows who is the sender and who is the receiver. While you were listening to this story, a translation like this went through somewhere. Maybe it was a journalist in Iran who paid for a VPN to tell the world the truth. Maybe an activist in Belarus received a donation from supporters, or maybe someone bought something illegal on the shadow market. You'll never know. No one will ever know. That's the point.